You are listening to Sweet 39, a podcast by Woman Hub, a space for honest conversations about the transitions nobody prepared us for. Today, I joined by Cecilia Kremer. Cecilia is a certified coach, PhD educator, and facilitator who helps women and leaders navigate career, purpose, leadership, and personal growth with greater intention and self-awareness. Throughout her own journey, she has worn many professional hats from consultant to research professor, entrepreneur, and coach. And through those experiences, to develop a deep understanding of what it means to reinvent yourself while staying connected to who you are. Today, we are talking about something that resonates with so many women approaching their 40s, the shifts in identity, power, relationships, and priorities that can emerge during this stage of life. Is it a crisis, a transition, or awakening? And how can we move through these changes with intention instead of fear? Cecilia, so happy to have you here. Welcome to Sweet 39.
Thank you. What an introduction, and what a wonderful way of inviting your audience in. I love that. I love the transitions and the intention.
I love that this is your work. I love that that's exactly what you focus on. I would love to start this conversation sharing with everyone, Cecilia, a little bit more of your work, the workshops you host, and the coaching sessions, and all the topics um, you tap on and you specialize on, and all the questions that women come to you to try to find a little bit more of clarity on their journeys.
What a delight to talk about this, to talk about my passions. So, one of my passions is to help professional women to thrive in the workplace. And, having had a whole career in like high tech and computer science and worked in as a user experience consultant, so being in the consultancy world as well, I understand and I have lived experience of how hard it can be to be in a male dominated environment. As part of my transitions, moving from Brazil and coming to the US, or even in Brazil, working for the US market, also what it means to be an immigrant, to be a foreign in that environment. So there's a lot that happens that I think we need to support to navigate and be successful in that environment. And I think for me, during a lot of this time, I was not aware of many of the things that were happening, and they were happening. So now my passion is to support the women who are in that space, to share all my wisdom, all that I have studied, all that I have learned, for them to have an easier path towards their success, an easier path than mine. So I think my work is grounded on two pillars. So of course the pillar of power is just so important for us to be able to talk about power. There's a lot of taboo about women talking about power. There's a lot of misuse and abuse of power in the world, and that's why we're like, I don't want to be powerful. I'm a humble person. I'm a nice person. I want to share power, but what does that mean? So I think that's one of the pillars that I really want to be in conversation with, and we all need to talk about more, especially women, because systemically we have a harder access to power. And the other one is empathy, because sometimes part of this abuse and misuse of power is that there is a loss of empathy. So there is a loss of relationality. So if I am in power, now everyone else has to do as I say, for instance. It's one of the ways in which culturally, we see power being exercised. So what that means is, if I ask you to do something, and I tell you have to do it, and I'm not willing to listen, how is it for you to do that? I don't have any empathy for you. So for me, it's important for us to be able to exercise power from a place of empathy. So then we can achieve power, but we don't lose sight of the humanity of the people that we're leading. So these are the things that I'm passionate about. So mostly empowering professional women, empowering Latina women. Now that I'm from Brazil, but I'm here in the U.S., So I help a lot of Latinas in the high tech industry, but not specifically. I mean, if you're a professional woman and you want to figure out a way to navigate the system in ways that are more empowering and connecting and fulfilling, then you're my person. And the way that I support people, there are many ways. I love what you shared. We all have so many identities, and sometimes we narrow ourselves into like one, like, oh, now I'm this, and now I'm that, and I cannot be multiple things. So I actually work as a coach with individual people. I work as a teacher, so I teach courses, either mine or through institutions or in organizations. So I'm also a teacher. I am also a community manager. I have a community that I call the Empathy Empowered Allies. So it's a community to foster allyship among women and empower ourselves by sharing the different powers that we each have, and therefore kind of uplifting everyone. So I'm also a community manager, speaker, facilitator. I'm a mom. I'm a wife. I have two kids, two young adults. So yeah, I guess these are sort of some of my identities. And I love the beach. I'm from Rio. I love hanging out at the beach. So I used to be a bodyboarder. So I love to cook. I love to meditate. So all of these identities are what make my life so rich and so fulfilling for me.
Oh my God. And I love that because I think so many times people, society, social media, I don't know exactly what is the source, but try to put us on boxes to and make us fit in there, and then we start trying to like really like cut the edges and make like trying to make ourselves to fit in it, and it's just so suffocating. And that's one thing that I feel like that I'm 39, that I feel like I need to breathe. I need my air. That everything that I've been cutting, I want it back. I'm done trying to fit in this box that I never intended to fit in. And that's my first question for you, Cecilia, is what questions start showing up at this stage of life for women that weren't here before, or maybe they were, but they were silent? Or like what questions women in this stage of life come to you and like look for support?
Yes. So, I mean, of course, different stages of life, we focus on different things and we have different needs. And I think it's just so important for us. And this is another passion of mine, because we tend to think about like empathy and relationships like between us and others. But really, it's really important for us to have empathy for ourselves, which means I'm accompanying myself. I'm a good friend for myself, because what good friends do is that they support us know what we need, to have clarity around like, oh, it seems like you really want this. It seems like this is where you're going. So having that reflection back. And I think, part of the moving through the different stages of life is attuning to what we need. And of course, when we are younger, because of the way humans develop, like we're kids. And at that point, although even unconsciously, we know we need our parents to survive. So what happens is it creates a focus on like, what do these people want from me? Because I need them to survive. So the more I do what they ask me to do, or they're my role models, they know how to do this thing called life, and I still need to learn. So whatever they do, I'm going to mimic that, because so it's just a really an innate, like intuitive, it's not like conscious at that stage. But then it kind of becomes a habit. And in our society, is a habit that is reinforced. So, for instance, if you go to school when you're obedient, then you get good grades. And then if you go to work and you do what your boss asks you to do, then you get a promotion. So we have a lot of forces that keep us focused like outwards as a way of making it through life. But I think as we mature, and of course it's different ages, but like 39 is an age when we start to see like, well, wait a minute, I made it this far doing all these things, but what really serves me? What is this really what I want? So let me give you an example. For me, when I was deciding my career, so I was, like, what college are you going to? What degree are you going to get? So I remember I didn't know. I was completely lost. I didn't have a passion. I actually was passionate about everything. I'm a very curious person. I had good grades, across the board. It was not like whatever was difficult, I was willing to work, to learn it. Whatever was easy, the better. And then I took a vocational test. And my vocational test came with a result that, I was inclined towards history and arts. I was living in Brazil, and in Brazil, if someone, you don't ask people like, what would be good for me to do with my career, and people say, well, how about you becoming a historian? At least in my circle, how about you becoming an artist? It's like a hobby. It's something you do on the side. You cannot survive that way. It's a reflection of our capitalist also a society, and the fact that in my, let's say, my circle, I didn't have artists or historians that were making it that I could kind of have a connection with and say, well, but what I had was a stepfather who worked at a big tech company. And what he told me is like, well, I see all these young interns come in and make good amount of money and have a stable job. How about you try and, get a degree in computer science? And I'm like, okay. So of course, I moved in my career, and I got really lucky that part of one of my twists and turns was actually I started off in AI, believe it or not. That was, one of my first jobs was in AI and helping you what the time was called like expert systems. So I learned a lot about that. But then there was another part of my work which was understanding usability. And that means understanding humans and designing experiences for humans. So there was that human part of it, and there was the art, part of it. And that really lit up a passion in me. And I had to study a lot about empathy. How do people work? How do they function? And what are their pain points? And what can I do to alleviate these pain points? So really using my compassion to design digital experiences. So my point is that at that time, then I started to allow myself to go from that moment of like, my stepdad telling me what was good for me, and it was, it was a reflection of the context that I was living in. So going from that place of like, well, I was told this is good for me, but now in all my twists and turns, I'm connecting with these things that are the things that I really love. And then like kind of tuning into that, like let's say exercising empathy in my work for designing new experiences for people, but then also to succeeding in my career. Because I could negotiate, I could be in difficult conversations. So just practicing that even in high tech. But then when I moved here to the US the last time, because I've been back and forth many times, but anyways, this last time I said, you know what? Now it's time for me to leave the high tech world behind, and to help it from the outside, to help these women. Like, I'm a leader. I was a leader in high tech. Now I want to, go out, get my coaching certification, and then help the women in there from the outside. And my hope is that one of the things that I want to do for them is that they don't have to wait so long to connect to themselves, to realize what it is that they really want, and to quiet all these noises and all of these external forces that many times drives us away from what we really want. So that was a long answer to your question. But I think when we're, when we're achieving more maturity and, what you're calling 39, I think the transition is from I've heard enough and I've figured out the system enough. And now I can really kind of set that aside and look inside so I can succeed from my inner power.
Looking at all these examples and these transitions and the moment that they happen, were they like career changes or actually career changes or just like identity changes throughout life that were happening side by side with because your identity was changing, career was impacted and changing, and your surroundings were changing as well?
Well, it's all interconnected. I understand that sometimes we like to simplify things so we can manage them in our mind and we can kind of create an image. But I really like to make space for us to see all these things come into place and how they're, like if you imagine a web and they're all nodes of a web. So, so you have dimensions of your identity, and then, you have your career, and then you have your family life. So, like leaving your family of origin, and then, like being maybe more independent in the world, and then understanding like, well, do I want to have a family now or not? So all of these things, they're happening at the same time. And I really like to mention like three things that that I invite people to look at. I mean, one is there's like your, let's say, your inner compass. So the decisions that you're making and the choices as you move forward. The other thing is like, what are the conditions? Sometimes the conditions are there for you to thrive, and sometimes they are not. And the more you keep pushing, you're trying to change yourself, or you're trying to power through, but you're not considering the possibility that maybe you need to change the conditions. Maybe you need a different place, maybe, and then the third pillar is like your relationships. So maybe you need a different community. You talked about like the boxes, and that sometimes we're trying to fit in. Well, in a way, a box is like our bubble of relationships. So if we're going one direction, and I'm in this bubble. So for example, let's say my career transition from high tech, I had my bubble of Latinas in tech, and the tech workers. And then as I became a coach, now I have this other bubble. I have my bubble of coaches, and we have different conversations, and I go for each of the different bubbles for different things, but we don't think about that. We usually don't have this sort of meta level awareness of
Mhm.
of what is happening. And when we don't have that, that means we limit our choices because we don't see that we have choices. So I have choices, like if my family has certain expectations about me, I need another bubble of people who don't, or who expect me to be what I want to become, just to support ourselves
I think
more.
that happens like a lot. I think that I see that happening um, with immigration, right? When because like you completely change your life to a new place, and you have to start like you want to keep the connections back home or wherever you're from and you call home. You want to keep those connections, but you have to create new connections that are aligned with the reality you are living right now and the challenges you are facing right now and the things you want to build. And you have to surround yourself to with like a different community, right? I think it happens the same thing. I'm watching from outside from motherhood, watching my friends become moms and having to create a new community to find moms who are aligned with their beliefs and the way they want to raise their kids and the type of play dates they want to have. Right now, it's interesting we're talking about this because I'm currently trying to conceive. And as an older person in my group, like all my friends already have kids. And I'm the one trying to conceive by myself as an independent mom. So it's a different lifestyle. And I was getting frustrated because of like, I'm feeling alone in this journey. And it took me a second to understand that I prepared for so many things to go through this journey, but I didn't prepare to look for a community who would be on the same stage that I am, like other women who are going through the same process that I'm going through. Another groups of solo moms, another group of moms who are trying to conceive through fertility processes. And I think that's it takes us at some time to digest, look around, and see like, wait a minute, I do have options.
Yes, yes, I love that. I mean, a lot of my work is really in supporting people of being mindful of the people around them and being intentional because we inherit these relationships, from home, or even when we come as an immigrant. Let's say you came to study and then you have your, the people who go to school with you, or you came for work and then you have your colleagues. But that is that is just like what was given, as opposed to like who are the people that I want to be with, and who are the people that align with the goals that I have for myself right now. We tend not to think about this. And it's something that we inherit culturally. I don't think our parents and grandparents had to think about this as much, but with migration and with rapid change in the world and in the workplace, like people are changing jobs and companies more often. So it gets really hard if we don't take the time. And I think this is the tricky part, because we think like relationships happen naturally.
Mm-hmm.
If you were if things are somewhat stable, so if you have a job and you've been in that job for 25 years, and everyone has been on the job for 25 years, and then you go to church on the weekends, and then you go for school, like for most of your life to the same school. I mean, that kind of happens, but when you're changing so fast, then we don't realize, because we're coming from the mindset that relationships are going to happen naturally, and I just stay with what I have, as opposed to, no, I am changing, my goals are changing, my circumstances, my environment is changing. Can I pause and be intentional about like, what do I really want, and who are the people that will support me in where I'm at? And that has to do with, like, let's say if you're, in a workplace, who are the people that click, and who are the people that don't, because you spend a lot of time in the workplace. Uh, when I talk to leaders, they say, well, I'm having a hard time with my team. And I say, well, how about you create your own team? If you could across the company structure, pick the people that you love and made them your team, what would your team look like? And some, many times they even find friends at work, which is wonderful. And what you're saying also, it's so sweet, because we have this group of friends, and we get attached, right? It's like, oh, these people, I love these people. We align in so many ways, but then the goals don't align anymore. So it doesn't mean that we don't like them anymore. We still have all, like all wonderful, I don't know, for me, I have my friends that I go to the beach with, and we all love the beach. But then, maybe they are not aligned with me in my goal in becoming a nonviolent communication certified trainer. So I have my bubble of nonviolent communication trainers. And what you're saying, you have your friends who, long-term friends who become moms, but then you're not on that boat. You're on this other boat. So it doesn't mean you need to leave them behind. You can still hang out with them for girls' night out when they're not hanging out with their kids. But then you also have your bubble of, women aligned with you who want to conceive and are trying to find this new way of conceiving. But I guess my invitation is for people, and I do that with my clients all the time, to think about like, where are you at? What are your goals? And who are the people that can support you on your journey? And if you don't have any, then where can you go to search for them? So I love that you're mentioning that, and sometimes we create this idea that, well, now if these friends have kids and I don't have kids yet, now we cannot be friends. Like we make it either or. And my invitation is for always for people to look again at the complexity. So I may be not hanging out with them as much as I used to, or maybe I'm not hanging out with them during the day when they are with the kids, but maybe in the evening after they put their kids to bed. So I guess what I want to mean is our relationships, we can always be in negotiation
Mhm.
around how we are relating, who we are relating with, and how we're relating with the people that we have around us. Because we can change that. We can change the ways in which we come together to meet everyone's needs to the best of our ability.
So true. I think that's what you mentioned earlier. We try to simplify everything, and the reality is it's complex, right? Relationships are complex, and you add different layers. Immigration is a layer, motherhood is a layer, career is a layer, and we're all trying to navigate everything at the same time. And when I wanted to bring a data here because I also think all these changes that we are navigating right now, everything is so new. As you mentioned earlier, we have access to so much right now. Before we would stay 20, 30, 40 years at the same job. We would go to do the same thing every weekend. Would be always that same routine for life, right? And now we change all the time because society asks us to change as well. There is a survey that was published on Time, and they say that 51% of Latinas reported being the first in their families to attend college. I love talking about first generation because it brings a world of opportunities, but it also brings a world of expectations on us, trying to build something completely new that we compared to what our parents did, and now building relationships that are changing at the same speed as everything else, right? I think many Latinas are carrying not only our dreams, but also the expectation of an entire family. And I think that a lot of times shapes the decision that we are making, on our 30s, on our 40s, because I think we start having a little bit more clarity of our independence and a little bit more clarity of the relationships we want to keep, the type of relationships that adjust to our new style. So I I think getting to this phase of life, it's a lot of adjustment, but mainly to think that we lose a lot, but we gain so much. And that's my next question for you. You mentioned earlier that we take so long to make a change, right? We wait so long. I think we gather so much information. I don't know if it's our empathy, if it's fear. What keep women stuck or holding to make the leap? That's one question. And the other one is we gain in this phase of life a lot with all these changes. We just sometimes don't realize what we are gaining. If you could share what you've been seeing from other women, the achievements and when the key switch, what happens with careers, what are we building, what you've been seeing in the community.
So starting with what keeps us stuck, and again, I'm going to mention a few things, but I think it's important to hold them as not exhaustive. These are just a few things that I'm mentioning here that are coming to mind that I see patterns in my clients. But again, if you're not in any of these boxes, it doesn't mean there are not other boxes,
Yeah.
and that there's not a place for you. So I want us all to, your listeners to hold maybe this is going to resonate, but maybe you have something else, and that is valid and true just as well. But some of the things that I see in my clients, that we see in research as well, is one, we I don't think we talk enough about, and we don't check in with ourselves around our capacity for success. Because we come, like for many Latinas, the parents strive so much, to make things happen for them. And there is a comfort zone in being in that space of, I am the one efforting to become something.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that when I'm on the leap and on the verge of becoming, I'm going to lose that pattern, and it can feel really scary that now I've got this and now what? So I might as well just stay here with the efforting. So sometimes we even sabotage ourselves. So when we get a compliment, let's say we did a great work, we delivered, a great, outcome in a project, and we get all of these compliments about our performance, about all that we put in, or all of our ideas, and it's like, oh no, that was super easy. It just came out naturally. Or no, that was, that was because I had everyone, engage in the project with me. It was not just me. So, and I'm not saying that these people did not contribute, but how can we hold and have the capacity to hold that the focus now is on us and that we're worthy of all of that appreciation. So I think this is important for us as Latinas, as immigrants, as people who are trying to, let's say, gain power in a certain system that didn't give it to us initially, that we can be attuned to that now I'm gaining, let's say I'm gaining power, so I am getting promoted, I'm making more money, and I can stand in my ground and be in integrity with that and be okay and not be nervous about it. So I think this is one thing, because then of course if we're nervous and if we're not accepting compliments and if we're not valuing ourselves, and that has to do another side of it is advocating for ourselves. If I make my work visible, or if I appreciate my own work in a team, I'm gonna sound like I'm bragging. Like we even have these terms. Like, is it bragging, or is it like, are you having a clear statement of a good thing that you did? So these are the things that kind of keep us stuck. And then also that fear of, well, then if I go up, there's only way down, like that's another fear. So, capacity for success, I think it's one thing. And also understanding that we may lose something. So you said, like, we strive so hard for our independence. So another pattern that we have is like, our parents do so much for us. So that's a narrative. I'm just mentioning a few narratives. So another narrative is like, well, we put all this work and all this money for you to go through college, and like, we worked so hard. And now that you got whatever you are, now it's time for you to support the family.
Mm-hmm.
So then, for some of us, it's like, now that I have this hope that I can do these things, as an outcome for all my effort, I want to do these things for me. But then there's the guilt. There's the guilt that now I have to do these, I have to give back to my parents, and then I'm not worthy of anything myself. I just have to give everything back. Or it could be, sometimes it's the other way around. It's like, my family's holding me back. I'm going to cut ties and I'm going to, go out in the world and do my thing. And again, we stay in this either or. It's like, I'm either giving back to my family or I'm not with my family. We don't take the time to think about what is the in between. Like, what can I negotiate with my family so I can set my boundaries and keep that relationship, but not the weight that I'm in debt. Or, what is a way that maybe I can, also distance myself a little bit, but then, and if I want to cut ties, there's no judgment around that. Sometimes it can be too much, that we cannot keep that tie. But then if we're not keeping the tie, how are we disengaging? How can we say, this is just too much for me. I need some time. I need to be more distant. We don't have these difficult conversations. Sometimes we just think we take some actions and there's no space to make agreements. And sometimes it can be even agreements of how distant we're going to be now, because that's what I need. So these are some of These are some of the patterns, and I want to mention one more that is so important, I think, career-wise, which is we make what I see in leaders and in Latina leaders, and there's research and studies around that, which is I make such an effort to become a leader that now my recipe for other Latinas to become leaders is for them to effort.
Mm.
So we sometimes are blind to the possibility that now that I worked so hard and that I made it, what I'm going to do is create better conditions to make it easier so that the coming Latinas don't have to work as hard as I did to go up the ladder. So
Yeah.
so this is important because we sometimes we perpetuate the things that did not work for us either.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We I have like some numbers focusing on career because I would love to get your insight about if success career wise it's changing. The concept of success is changing and I because I think a lot about it and then when we look at numbers in society, for example, Latinos represent 9% of the US population, but only 1% of C suite is active in corporate America. Only 5% of entry level corporate America workers are Latinas. And the numbers go on and you don't see good numbers. You don't see like a representation, like we are fighting to be there, like legit fighting to get a spot and it's not that we are not asking. There's another data that talks about Latinas asking for promotions, that we are asking for promotion, but just much less likely to receive them compared to men. And then when we look at another resources, right? Like, okay, so if we are fighting in corporate to have like to be respected, to grow, to have our voices heard, Latinos are one of the fastest growing entrepreneurs groups in America. 2.9 million businesses in the US. And these rates are like skyrocketing, like nonstop. My question with all these numbers that I just shared is the workforce changing or are we changing the workforce because we're going to build what we need to be able to succeed? So a lot of times we leave and we start our businesses for the sake of I got to make this happen.
Yes, yes. Oh, thank you for bringing these two scenarios like at the same time so we can look at them both because again, it's not either or, it's like a both and. And one thing that I want to mention, remember I talked about the three things. I mean, there's, ourselves personally, there's the relationships that I have and the environments that I'm in. So the numbers that you're bringing shows that, let's say corporate America is not a safe, healthy, nurturing, flourishing, empowering context for the Latinas. That's what the numbers are showing because, we're working hard. We're trying the best we can, but it's like swimming against the current. Right? You're swimming, 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 and then you're getting so tired, and the current just keeps coming. So then, for some of us, it's like I'm just done with this. If I'm gonna swim and the current's gonna be against me, I'm gonna find some place where the current is for me, and I'm gonna create it myself. So, the entrepreneurial data that you're mentioning, parts of it can be like this movement of I'm going to create a safe space and I'm going to be with my people because my people can value me, they understand me, they support me, they want to swim with me. Because it doesn't mean that, let's say in corporate, that people don't mean well, like the non-Latinos, the people, it's not that they don't mean well. Sometimes they want, but there is a distance between intention and action and realization. And I think this is what the gap that we haven't bridged yet. We do have the intention, or at least most people say and most companies say they have the intention for equity. But when you're in a meeting, and let's say, like for me, I've been in so many meetings in which I was the only woman and I was the only Latina. And I didn't know back then. I'm happy that things are changing in this way, but back then I wasn't tracking who was speaking for how long and how was my voice being received or not, whether my voice was being minimized or amplified. So I'm inviting people, my clients, the leaders, the allies. We need the allies so much because I may be tracking that I'm being minimized. But if I say, wait a minute, I didn't finish what I wanted to say yet, then the sense in the room is like you're the nagging one. Sometimes there is judgment in the room for you to creating space for your own voice. So you need an ally to say, no, what Cecilia has to say is actually really important, and here's why. So we need the non-Latina voices to jump in and support us, or even before we say anything, that they jump in. That would be ideal. But that means the allies need to be willing to do that work. And I think and they're in the comfort zone. So I think this is part of the challenge, is that to change this environment, to make it work for Latinas, it's not only about us Latinas doing the work. I mean, we really need the allies to support the change. And again, they're in the comfort zone. And then that also means, because another part of corporate is like there are so many things happening at the same time. So there's a sense of scarcity, right? So it's a pyramid. I'm going to get a promotion. So if me amplifying your voice means that I have less access to promotion, then what is my motivation? Like the incentives, if they're not there, again, it's another barrier. So there's one thing about then the shift, well, I'm not seeing this environment being helpful for me. I'm going to move and I'm going to create my own world and be an entrepreneur. And I think another aspect is also not only for Latinas, but I think for all of us, and especially women, because, we want to become moms, we take care of the family, we have so many other burdens of, being the emotional workers of the workplace. There are many things that happen, but what I see, and there's research around that, is like Gen Z right now is much more attuned to combining well-being with work. It used to be, and this is a dynamic many of us still go through, like I come to work and I get drained, and then I go home and I recharge, and then I go to work and I get drained, and then I go home and I recharge. And what I love about what Gen Z is standing up for, and that is for all of us, and I believe that will benefit Latinas as well, is like, no, I spend most of my day at work. I need to be able to spend energy and recharge my energy at work. And again, for us as entrepreneurs, we have more room to invent that, because we're not in a structure. We're creating our own structures. And we can create a structure that supports that. And I just want to say, we don't have to do it by intuition. There is a book called Reinventing Organizations. It's a great book that shows like all the different patterns of ways in which companies organize themselves and how that affects growth and relationships. So we really have resources, but it's, not many of us don't know that, but there are actually resources that we can use as we try and create this work. And one final thing that I'm going to say is, we can become entrepreneurs, but there are costs of that. There are costs of the stability, a predictability of income, and all of that. So one thing that I also work with my clients who need the financial stability, who cannot go without that, is like, even in a system that is not supportive, I can carve my own path around getting recharged and being well and being in that environment. It's a lot more work. It's not ideal, but there's again no judgment. Because you're swimming against the current, you can choose, like, I'm gonna swim some, and I'm just gonna be in the lazy river for some. So there's a choice around that as well. It's just about you being mindful what is working or not. So that self-empathy, again, just self-empathy is such a source of power that we don't realize. When we're attuning to ourselves and we know what we need, we can be with a lot of challenges and struggles, but from a place of being well and being strong, and we don't realize that.
To finalize our conversation, if you could give one piece of advice to a woman who is 39 years old today, what would that be?
Well, I think my main piece of advice would be to be connected with yourself to the most of your ability. So tune in to what you need, tune in to what you want, to what your goal is, and look around and map, really map what is aligning and what is not. So you can have more of the things and the people and the environments that are in alignment with your journey, as a way of supporting yourself. You are worthy of that, and you are worthy of making the time to connect with yourself. And I'm going to say, if it's really hard for you to do that, you don't need to do that on your own either. Find communities that support you being with you. So communities, like my empathy empowered allyship communities of self-development, communities that will ask you questions about you, and then you can use that as support for self-empathy. Self-empathy, it does not need to be a lonely activity. It can be someone giving you empathy, so you develop your own self-empathy. So that's my advice. Be a good friend and be good company, regular company to yourself.
Thank you so much, Cecilia.
Thank you.